Nick Bonner and the co-producer of this film. There's a team of basically myself and Dan Gordon. We've made 3 documentaries, and we worked with one cameraman, a guy called Nick Bennett, and for this we had the luxury of a sound man as well. This is our 3rd film. Our first one was I won't bore you, but our first film sort of got us, if you like, an entree into North Korea. And it was the film of the football team of 1966, a North Korean football team who created the greatest shock in World Cup history by beating the Italians. They came as 1,000-to-1 outsiders. But perhaps the greatest impact that they had is that they turned around the town of Middlesbrough, who sort of saw them as this sort of the communist enemy coming, and were told by London, do not look after these people. You know, literally, they do not want to give recognition to the communists. But in fact, they turned around this town who embraced them, so much so that 3,000 of these Middlesbrough football fans followed them from Middlesbrough to the other side of the country when they went to play against Portugal. That team were then disappeared off the face of the earth. The BBC said they'd come from, as if they'd arrived from the moon and no one knew anything about them. And when they left, the allegations were that they'd been womanizing and drinking. We followed those up. If ever you've been to Middlesbrough, the allegation of womanizing is, sorry, I don't know anyone who is from Middlesbrough, and we actually followed the allegations of drinking, but that's another story. I'll tell you very quickly, actually, because we went to the bar, and the bar owner in Liverpool was still there. The idea was that they'd thrown the match because they'd been boozing. And when we went to the bar, we said, oh, I remember that. He had a Cheshire accent rather than a Liverpool accent, and he said, yeah, they did. We told the locals that the North Korean football team were coming in and to drink up because and they did. They drank the bar dry. So we immediately went, oh bloody hell, it's true. They were drunk when they went to play. He said, oh no, mineral water, lad, mineral water. So it was that was the sort of nice ending. We found the team. We ended up, Dan and I, promising never to make another film, and we ended up taking the football team of 1966 back to England, which was bizarre and a wonderful experience. We had sort of 40,000 people at Everton who stood up for them, and Middlesbrough 30,000 people. So it was a wonderful event. The Koreans liked that. They liked it enough to let us access for the next film, which was on the mass games, which is A State of Mind. That film was getting a little bit, we started pushing the boundaries, and rather significantly when initially we went just to film the mass games, and what we ended up with was actually access to 2 individuals, 2 girls in that performance, and through those 2 girls we got access to their families. The biggest mystery that's ever been, I've been in North Korea, we run Koryo Tours, a travel company, in '93, and then we started sort of doing films quite seriously to the end of the '90s and haven't stopped. The story that's always been there is the story of the defectors. The 4 defectors left in the 60s, but really nothing was heard about them. In 1996, the American government put out a bulletin saying that we recognise there are 4 defectors who starred in a propaganda movie. What they didn't know at that time was one had already died, Absher had died, and that the other one was about to die subsequently 2 years, leaving Jenkins and Joe, who were the main protagonists. It's a film that has been, I'll answer some questions after, sorry it's going to be a bit hot, but it's a stunning, I think that the most important thing is the actual access that was gained for us by our North Korean operatives. We work, this isn't sort of government level, these are people who really fight for us, and it's one woman in particular who's given us the most incredible access possible. So I hope you enjoy the film. It's 90 minutes, so if you need to go to the loo, dash in and out now. If something goes wrong, I will be on hand, but it's not exactly the paramount, but I hope you you get the idea. So without further ado. Great. So well that was it. Questions? Are there any? Okay, that's very good. Slowly, I'll tell you a little bit about. Question.
I'll ask you, what was probably the norm? What was the North Korean government's response to your film? Presumably they've seen it.
What was the North Korea's government's response to the film? What's been interesting is this is, as I was saying, the 3rd documentary. The first one was accepted, sort of hands down. It was the life of their football heroes. In fact, so much so that their football heroes was almost sort of reborn. They Pack Dwick and that lot said they sort of almost been forgotten after their victory in '66. But after this film, he said, I now drive around in my car, and if I get stopped by the police, they stop and they look at me, and instead of saying, oh, you're the player from 1966, they actually say, you were in that British movie, weren't you? So that's quite a nice, that first film was a very gentle one. It was shown broadcast and televised in North Korea and in South Korea, so that was pretty neutral. The second film, A State of Mind, I think we sort of start hitting the bone, but the parameters that our filming goes into are pretty defined. With the football one, obviously, it's the story of the football players and the allegations of what happened on their return. With The State of Mind, it was addressing these girls and these principles of this mass games, but also we talked about the arduous march, the period of starvation, and it was where one of the mothers of Hyun-sun, she says, I'll tell you how bad it was. During the arduous march, it was my daughter's birthday, we had half a bowl of porridge rice, and she had a whole bowl. And it was that sort of look into North Korean society that actually rather jumped a few Koreans. And they I think, found that a little bit too difficult. As one of the guides said, thing. And this film, and that film was both screened at the North Korea International Film Festival. It's called the Pyongyang International Film Festival, which we, as the company that I work with, we actually sort of help and sponsor. So much so that we took Bend It Like Beckham, and then also, of all things, Mr. Bean, the disaster movie, which was seen by 12,000 people, and quite interesting. The first sort of skateboard ever to appear on North Korean television film. And this one has actually tested the parameters, of course, this one with the abductees and various others, and yet it's been seen in North Korea, it's been seen by Joe. None of our films are ever shown to the Koreans until they've actually been broadcast, often by the BBC first. And it's all right, we seem to have sort of passed the acid test. It's very difficult, of course, making documentaries and being objective. I mean, what is objectivity? But it's certainly, I would like to think, after 120 hours of filming, we also spend a lot of time without cameras. I mean, there's at least sort of 6 weeks beforehand just going and getting to know our protagonists. And that really has resulted in I hope, the sort of basically our observation of Joe as sort of balanced as possible. I hope in a sort of convoluted way that answers the question.
Do you know if it's shoot?
So how is it in South Korea? This film, this film hasn't been. It was premiered at Busan, and it hasn't been accepted as well as the last films. It's because I think in South Korea they're wanting to look into North Korean society, and this hasn't been much of an opener into that. I just remember that we actually got criticised for our last film. When you go back to Pyongyang to show the film for the first time, you hope you're going to be able to use your return ticket, or should you just have brought the single. And you sit there, and of course the first film was with the football players, and they liked that, and it was great, and we ended up taking them back. The second film, they said, well, this film is very dark, it's not nearly as good as your first film. And I thought, God, that's it, we're done for now. And what it was Dan Gordon and I, the director, we both sort of sat there together, looked at each other. They said, yes, every day it was raining, so that was their dark, sort of different interpretation. But the best criticism they said was this film is very boring for us. It's just like real life, and that was a fantastic. If ever you want a stamp of approval for a film, it was that. And speaking to North Korean friends who are living out in Beijing and various other places, they say it is very true. You get a slightly more, perhaps people preface their answers with, thanks to the great leader, we have X, Y, and Z, and thanks to the great leader, I can dance so well for this, that, and the other. But if you take away that, you get a pretty normal look at North Korean, at Pyongyang society, and that's quite important. So,
yeah, one of his kids, James, I was quite surprised at the level of his English. Now, is that your... was it just that we saw a very small snippet, or was his English quite poor?
It was James Dresnok's English pretty poor. James goes to the foreign language school and to learn English, and you saw there, which is quite it's very interesting to see just how bad his English is. His Korean, of course, is absolutely fluent, and he corresponds. His mates are Korean. I mean, a lot of things again we see off camera, of course. Him with his friends and colleagues, they do mess around. He can play basketball, he can swim, he does interactive sports. So it's not this idea that he's being sort of boxed away from everyone, but his English is very poor. And he's very nervous when he presents in English. When he's in Korean, he's a lot more sort of relaxed.
Does he live with his father?
He does, yeah. And this is another thing we weren't too sure of, but one of the great advantages that we have is that you go to cranes and you think, well, you know, how can we were for the last film there was a little dog that appeared, and we were told that this dog is obviously a stooge dog that they put in, and of course it's the first thing that goes through our mind. And a critic said, well, if they fell for that, then they'll fall for anything. And if you'd had asked us, but of course we asked that, but then what you do is you go back in the photo album and you see, you know, the little dog, in fact, 4 years ago. So either North Korea were waiting for us to arrive to make a film on the mass games, and so this dog is ready, or you know, we get there by, you know, just by our hard work. And the same with Joe things. If you actually go through his photographic album, you know at certain periods in his life, certainly they were together for holidays and high days. Now I don't know what the rest of the situation is, but if you ask them directly and they say, of course. I mean, I remember sometimes also the obvious is rather odd. We went to a football match in North Korea, and it was the women's matches are always, this one was a man's match. We went there and it was empty, the stadium was empty, no supporters, and I just lost it. I said, this is bloody typical. Here we are, you're limiting you know, your own people to come and support your country to watch, you know, play football. And this bloke just turned around and said to me, don't be daft. We're crap. We're not good football players at the men's level. Come and see a women's football team. And then so we went to see the women's football match sort of 3 weeks later, and it was full to the point where people actually burst out the glass windows to get actually into the football stadium, a 36,000 seater. So sometimes you sort of forget that you know, life does go. There is a sort of real edge there. Not everything is sort of cloak and dagger. And I think there's a good relationship between the boys in there. And when we were there, you know, Tony with his father, it's quite a strong relationship. Doesn't mean he doesn't beat him in sort of on other days, but it looked quite fun.
How much does he know about his dad's past and the life outside?
Very little. How much does he know?
Pictures or anything?
Yeah, no. I mean, one thing we'd like to make is to be able to go back in 10 years or 5 years' time and go back and of course take that further. Very difficult on that one. You asked the boys. You saw, in fact, the parish boys. That we took. There's a whole lot of film that we didn't see, but where we showed them photographs of their father that they had never seen of from the Americans. Of course, when his father defected, he didn't take anything with him. So for the first time, they are seeing their parents in the American side and how they lived, and also grandparents and etc. So, and that was very emotional. Seeing a parish, she broke down in tears and things. So I think just this idea that this is her husband, perhaps the part of the husband that she never knew. I don't know, to be honest. I think the boys, you know, they're sort of aware that who their father is. I mean, that their father says, you know, I'm a citizen of the world, but I am an American. Whereas the boys say, you know, we have an American, you know, we are American children, but our citizenship is Korean, and that's the difference.
Did you ask Jenkins for an interview?
Yeah, did we ask Jenkins for an interview, a follow-up interview? Jenkins, again, we met in Pyongyang, and then we went to follow up with interviews, but we couldn't get access. I mean, we went to the trials in Japan, we went to the villages, and no, they didn't want us to have access. I think it was partly because his book was coming out, and partly, I mean, possibly because I think he probably thought we were stooges. I mean, I don't know, but we didn't get access to him.
What was the real reason for the lives of the guys that kidnapped? Were they, what was the aim? Was it for them to become spies, or some of them, because I had a feeling that perhaps some of them would have been ordered somebody to kidnap two women.
Yeah, what was the abductee issue? Again, what you've seen is we ask the questions. We you know, we don't actually state. We let Siem answer herself. You know, we say, you know, the situation here is that you know, you say you came here on holiday. We find that very difficult to believe. Can you give us your answer? She gives an answer. We're still not satisfied. We ask again. I mean, we're not we're not going to start pulling nails out and questioning. But I don't know. I mean, the answer is I don't know. And then you build up, you know, and Joe, you know, there's now the situation, you know, his wife being Romanian, etc., etc. You ask Joe, he's going to give his own. He's an adult man. He'll give his own, or how he sees best to reply. And I think that's quite interesting. Joe is a character who he definitely presents himself in a certain way, and he's also quite a. As a character, he's had an amazing life. I mean, he had a very miserable time going up in the States. There's no doubt about that. And if you look at his mate, Sonny Jeter, who was mates with Joe, and Sonny is actually a very affable character, very nice character, the American chap you saw, had a great sort of soft spot for Joe. But Joe had a miserable time, and his life has been running, and he ran, he basically ran to Germany, and when he heard that his wife had divorced him, there's a bit in the film that we couldn't put in, at Wildflecken in Germany, he held a taxi at knife point. So he was already on charge there. He broke down when as an American officer said, clean this half track with a toothbrush, and he just said no, and then did this run. He then went, once he's learned about his wife's divorce, he then went to South Korea, and then he was told he couldn't go to the DeVille, and then he ran to Russia, to the Russian embassy, and then that was it. So his running stopped, and I think he sells himself as this. He eventually sort of realised within himself he had become a Korean. This was the only way he was going to survive in this society, by taking it all on. Whereas Jenkins is a very different character. Now then you have the issue of the abductees coming in. The only one we could speak to, of course, was Siam, and that's the answer she gave. So I don't know, really. I mean, it's an open gambit. That's as far as we pushed it on this film. And again, you in the end, after 120 hours, there's only so much you can put in. But I do know a lot more. But for this film, that's as much as could go in with that story, of which we felt, their reply. You don't want to hear sort of my response. That's a piece on the documentary.
Because it seems to be like a massive anniversary, right? Like it's for
Yeah, if
were not like single.
No, abductees are massive, of course, and then there's the Japanese abductees in '78. So there was definitely something going on, and the question is, I don't think we'll get to the bottom of it at all. But if it is getting on, we've now actually sort of uncovered it because we've actually filmed the boys. So that's on one side quite interesting. But yeah, there's a lot that goes bump in the night, and I think this film, if anything, leaves you is a lot of questions that we had, and we asked as far as we could go.
Have you or any of the protagonists met Kim Il-sung and any of the two Kims? And also, do you ever get approached by Western intelligence agents pumping you for information?
I've never met I've seen them. I met Kim Il-sung and I've seen Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. And the other question, I'll take you outside and shoot you silently. What's interesting is I think people are very surprised at the level of information that comes out from the documentaries. But no, I mean, we again, with most of our things, we tread a sort of very neutral line. And we don't have any information. I mean, we see what we see. I think what's amazing is what you do see on the filming is exactly what we see. Anything else that's of any great interest goes into the film. There's one bit that I did miss, which was the last film was an elder woman I'd love to have got in, and she says, you don't understand that this generation, this younger generation, they don't have the same hate for the imperialists as we do, and it's up to us to try and teach them that. And that was a piece, but it's interesting. That's the psyche they're coming from. But to a North Korean, America is as abstract as to an American living in Virginia, as North Korea is abstract to them. It's rather an odd situation. Two more, yeah, lovely. Two more businesses. So
Can I ask, I'm quite up to speed with these political situations. Why have you been allowed in the first place to shoot this documentary?
But why have we got such access? I think it's been mainly through the first film, which was allowed. It was a film that they accepted. They'd known me for 10 years, and they said, well, it's up to you if this goes wrong. You're not going to be making another documentary. You're not coming to Korea again. It was quite clear that if you're given this opportunity to get in, that it was based on trust. The second film, The Mass Games, that was accepted, but this idea of actually getting in to know the families, that was a very different thing, and that was particularly the individuals that we work with, who went further than you could possibly imagine. They went on their own behalf to get us access to the families, to get us to the countryside, etc. And with this film again, I think it was I still don't know why we were allowed to make it. The Koreans, they say of our films, we don't necessarily like what you film, but at least you don't lie, and that's allowed us, I think, incredible access. And of course, again, within the parameters we work in, we are just dealing with our subject matter. We're not going any further than that. We're pretty honest with what we deal with. There's all sorts of learning. I think I've told people before, lessons that you learn for them to come to your side. One was the very first film we had. We were filming old people just for texture, And then the Korean says, why are you always filming old people? You're doing this to show how poor our country is. And Dan and I went silent and no one to answer. And our soundman said, well, aren't you proud of your old people who fought for you in the Korean War? And then suddenly, you know, old people were being brought left, right, and centre. and I think it's that, that's a very naive sort of one, but it builds up from that. So people actually understand in the end, you know, they let you go out with this incredible amount of material, and they trust you with that to, you know, to edit a film that, you know, it will be acceptable. So basically, trust is how I'd put it. But I would say that is probably as far as you can push a documentary in North Korea. Should I take a last?
I have two questions. Did it take a lot to gain the trust of this guy? Like, did it take a lot of cajoling to get to the point where you had his trust and you were able to talk? And like, how much time did you spend from the beginning to the end? Like, how long was this process for you?
Joe I've known since May 2003, so and we sort of started filming, so I've known him pretty solidly for a year, and the filming periods were over 2 slots of 4 weeks, plus me going in 2 weeks beforehand for each one, plus 2 weeks after, so quite a considerable amount of time to sit with sit with him socially and get to know him. Joe was very happy to tell his side of the story. When I first met him, this was in 2003, I was dragged off a tour and just sat down and he said, hey boy, the first time in my life I couldn't, I had so many questions to ask and I couldn't think of one to ask him. I mean, this man left the known world in '62. He's not spoken to Westerners other than the 3 defectors since. His whole language, his whole everything is sort of rather dated. So that was quite a few hilarious moments. But he was happy, and especially when the allegations came in about when Jenkins, because Jenkins, of course, we have to remember that the allegations that Jenkins made. Remember, Jenkins was also fighting for his position. We actually asked, just an aside, people often ask, who do you believe, who do you side with? Jenkins says, the North Korean, on the behest of the North Koreans, Joe used to tie me up and beat me, and Joe said, tie him up, why do I need to tie him up? I can hold him in one hand and beat him with the other. And that's Joe, and actually that sort of made me feel a lot more secure because I was very worried about that, and I actually think that is it. They just did not like each other. When I was in that company, it was very clear that both Dan and myself had this very strong feeling that they were not happy boys together. Joe had he'd been with Parrish and Hampshire, there'd been this happy 3, and Inc had come an NCO, which is a rank higher, and he'd used his rank, and he'd broken up this sort of happy trio. So Joe, when they were there together, it was like, this is the last American bloke, we have something in contact. And when the allegations came in, Joe you saw it there firsthand. I mean, nothing's really took. He was not a happy man. But he's happy to have his story told, that he tells it how he'd like to tell it. But we have, just out of interest, because of a quick sales thing, the other 2 films we've got here, they're, I think we're selling for an extortionate, they're actually copies that we bought, so they're fakes that we bought when they were fakes to stop them being faked. So we're now selling them. Those 2, they're 100 or 150 for the 2 films, the first film. It's not this film. And then there's also the book, The Pyongyang Times, if you want to know more about Korea, or Hannah, if you ever wanted to go to North Korea. If you wanted to stay in North Korea, we can always come back and make a film of you every so often. There is one more plan. We hope to make another project next year, so if anyone's got some money and they want to do a project in North Korea. But thank you very much to Bookworm. Thank you for coming. Sorry about the weather. Thank you.